नमस्कार, आदाब, सत श्री अकाल दोस्तों। स्वागत है आपका एक बार फिर से हमारे YouTube चैनल ब्रास फ्यूजन्स पर, जहां आज हम आपके लिए लेकर आए हैं एक नया लेसन।
नो मैम, रीजन देने का जरूरत नहीं है। मैं कहा कि लैंग्वेज ऑफ 72 इज लाइक दैट, इट्स वेरी एग्जॉस्टिव, वेरी वाइड, सो जरूरत नहीं है। बट अगर वो रीजन साइट करते हैं तो उस रीजन की लीगैलिटी और रेलेवेंसी का रिव्यू हो सकता है।
वेरी करेक्ट। और मान लीजिए वो रीजन देते नहीं है क्योंकि कोई जरूरत नहीं है, ये तो बहुत साफ तरीके से बता दिया गया था केहर सिंह वाले जजमेंट में कि रीजन देने की जरूरत नहीं है, ना कि आपको ओरल हियरिंग की भी जरूरत नहीं है। पर अगर मान लीजिए प्रेसिडेंट कहते हैं कि मुझे पर्सनल सुनवाई होनी है या ओरल हियरिंग होनी है, तब उसमें कोई हर्ज नहीं है, वो बुला भी सकते हैं। ठीक है, पर ना बुलाने का ये तात्पर्य नहीं है कि वो wrongful use of discretion हो गया। But suppose there are no reasons and a person files a petition in court saying that the president is declining to exercise his power or he's not exercised it correctly. On what basis will the court exercise its judicial scrutiny when there are no reasons? What exactly did Epuru Sudhakar say? Because that is the true value addition of Epuru Sudhakar's case. What is it that the Epuru Sudhakar said?
Ma'am, in the end, Justice Justice Basayas was saying that how the judiciary is not usurping any powers from the president. What it's doing is looking like legal reasonableness of whatever he has done. And if somebody
didn't use the word reasonableness, they never use the word reasonableness, because reasonableness would indicate that you are evaluating the decision itself and whether it is a reasonable inference from the material. So they were very careful because the word reasonableness goes to the heart of the decision. The only thing they said was that even if there are no reasons, what is it that they can examine to find out whether extraneous or irrelevant or other matters guided the president or the governor?
I believe after they talked of the three cases, the Maruram, Keir Singh, and Tata Cellular, the judge goes on to list certain concerns that should be seen in case a petition arises, whether any of these arise from the president's pardon. So I
have a feeling that they also said another thing, that you can look at the material which was placed before the president. You can ask for that to be produced. So, even if there are no reasons, my question was, how will the court exercise scrutiny? No need to give reasons, but you can still ask the government to place before the court the materials that had been placed in front of the president. And you can see whether these materials were relevant for the president coming for the decision that he did take. Now, this is a subtle point, so please appreciate it. We are not saying whether looking at these materials, hum isko zarur pardon de dete. We are not substituting the court's opinion for that of the president. Okay, so that is why I'm not using the word reasonable. That this is a reasonable decision that he could have taken. No, we're not going into the content. We are just saying, was there relevant material in front of the president for him to come to such a decision that he could have taken? Meaning thereby, we are willing to concede, the court is willing to concede that looking at this relevant material, X person may have come to a decision saying pardon de do, Y person could have decided looking at the same material, nahi pardon nahi dete. But material that is there should be relevant. And in this particular case, as the three students have pointed out in the last class, the material was a mix of irrelevant material also. One, they talked about the party affiliation of this man, how he had been a good congressperson. Number two, the deputy superintendent of police, who before the election and before the change of government said that the respondent who was seeking now release his presence in the constituency would be a threat to law and order. But once the Congress government came into power and the party changed and his wife became an MLA, he said, no, his presence here does not. And so the Justice Pasayat says, if you have such pliable bureaucracy, then relying on their material is worthless, because they will swing exactly as the political breeze flows. They will go like this and like that, and therefore this material is irrelevant material. Now, the second way, so therefore in Kehar Singh, they were focusing on the judgment of the decision of the president. Has it been taken malified? Has it been taken on the basis of relevant circumstances? Has he relied on irrelevant circumstances? Now, Ekuru tells us, in order to come to this decision, reasons are not necessary, but look at the material that was placed in front of the president. That's one thing. And then there's a second new point that, in my opinion, Ekuru, the Justice Pasayat's judgment, lays out. He says that the person who applies for a pardon to the president must come with clean hands. What does that indicate? If there is an appeal pending somewhere in the courts, that must be brought to the notice of the president. If the convict himself has suppressed any relevant information, that will go against the person giving a presence. So in the last class, somebody had written a question in the chat box. Suppose after Supreme Court's petition, conviction, a person files for presidential pardon. In the meanwhile, can he file for review and curative petition? If you are filing for review and curative petition, you must inform the president so that he can decide whether to defer his own decision on that file or not. Because otherwise, you are suppressing extremely relevant information, and that means that you are seeking the presidential pardon. You are not coming with clean hands. And therefore, in the Ekuru Sudhakar case, the court, on two grounds, quashes that governor's order. On the one hand, they say that the governor relied on irrelevant materials, that is, good Congress worker, that's there. But the second point also is that that respondent to, I'm forgetting his name, the man that was convicted, the husband of that MLA.
G.V. Reddy.
That he also, if he had suppressed relevant information, that there is all pending cases should have been mentioned while moving the clemency petition. So to come back to your question, Akash, if you have moved your clemency petition and then baad mein as a late lateef you are going to file for the review petition under Article 137 or the new remedy which has been created by the Supreme Court in Rupa Ashokpura's case. We'll come to that when we come to judiciary. So if you don't know it, don't get hassled. I've not yet taught it. The curative petition. If you are moving the curative petition, then you must inform the president, please keep my petition pending, let me see the outcome here. Because you should normally, otherwise you are not moving your petition with clean hands. So I think the two new points that in my mind come out in Ekuru, no need to give reasons, yes, you can look at the material, and a petition can be quashed not only for a wrongful decision taken by president or governor on grounds of mala fide or extraneous circumstance. It can also be quashed. I think the possibility now exists in case the clemency petition itself had been moved with unclean hands and the entire facts were not placed in front of the president or governor, which means, technically speaking, the possibility exists that even the state or the government may ask for a judicial review of a clemency petition to which they themselves gave an advice for. Okay. We've never had a circumstance, always it is the aggrieved party who has moved for judicial review. You can take Mohammad Yaqub's case, you can take this Kehar Singh's case, you can take Epuru Sudhakar. It's always a convict who has moved. But because Epuru has added that new point that the clemency petition should have been moved with full disclosure and you should not have come with unclean hands, I think I'm just making the statement that the possibility exists that maybe somebody has been pardoned and subsequently the state comes to know that actually he should not have been given pardon because he concealed certain facts. Then the possibility exists that the state itself may go and ask for setting aside of that pardon order that had been given under either 72 or 161. Okay. So whenever you read a judgment, now you're getting to be more and more mature students. You must have a mental question. One, as I told you, and I still reiterate, that the quorum, that is CORAN, meaning what is the bench, how many people wrote judgments, what is the concurring, that you will note down. What were the contentions? And if they are citing any earlier precedent, always ask yourself the question, was there any value addition made by the ratio of this judgment? So that you will know that उन्होंने ऐसे बोला पर इस केस में ये भी extra आया है. Okay, it will make your study and the internalization of the learning from that judgment that much better. So, apart from reading the judgment, also have a little one sheet of paper where you also note down the key points. You don't have to write facts, everything in great detail, except, 2-3 words or 2-3 sentences or phrases. It can capture it. Okay. And in fact, the deeper and better you know your case, the briefer and more succinct can be your notes. Okay. Because you've understood it completely. You will know कि इस case का सार क्या है. What is it that it is saying? So use those things to study and go back again. And you will find that even during exam time, it will be easier. Huh? Okay, did somebody say something? I don't know. Because, when it comes near the exam, and because I've been teaching for many, many years now, I know students have this problem. In our case material, the constitutional law is the biggest case material. Okay? We didn't do it to torture you. That's not the reason why. But it's just that there are just so many important cases that are there. And you cannot be a first-rate lawyer or a judge or a legal academic, or whatever you decide to do, without having some mastery over constitutional law. You see, at some level, every matter gets constitutionalized. It should be a property matter, it can be a tax matter, it can be a divorce matter, it can be a criminal law matter. But ultimately, because it comes to the Supreme Court and the judge will examine it not only statutorily, but also in terms of a constitutional framework. And these cases, as you have seen, are elaborate. And despite our attempt to edit the cases, there are 50 cases. If you don't do this groundwork now...
Ma'am, there are 70 ma'am.
70, okay, what was
the case material has 35 printed therein and 35 are not printed. But
okay, 70. Yeah. And in class, sometimes we mention even more, right? So, therefore...
Just like they're saying it's
70. So what I'm saying is if you did like this on a sheet of paper, so you had a notebook with the case material, then you can, or somewhere you wrote it, because nowadays, this time we're not going to have printed. It's all online this time. So it would make it easier. Okay. So I'm just summing up my discussion of the executive power. So we're looking at executive power, what is the extent 73, then aid and advice 74, and we've looked at the different areas over which executive power. There's the last one, which is ordinance, but because we've put it in a separate unit, I'm not dealing with it, but it is also an exercise of executive power. Now, because the executive under our constitutional scheme is of parliamentary democracy is also answerable to the legislature, the topics of executive and legislature greatly overlap. So I'm going to do some of the cases like S.P. Anand and B.R. Kapoor actually as part of the legislature. But easily could come. So even our questions, when we do set it in the question paper, there are no bright lines only legislature. You will find that they are blended because of our form of parliamentary democracy that we have. Now let's look at the legislature. Okay, and remember that the executive is of course a subset of our legislature because of our parliamentary system. Now, in my last class, when we were studying the NCT judgment, we noticed that parliamentary democracy incorporates the principle of collective responsibility of the executive to parliament. And Dr. Chandrachud, Justice Chandrachud, had mentioned 3 qualities of a collective responsibility. I wonder if you remember that Justice Chandrachud had talked about the confidential principle. That is the confidence principle, the confidential principle, and the unanimity principle. So I'm going to use that as my starting point for when I come to the legislature. When Article 75 says there shall be a Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers shall in turn be appointed. Okay, let me not just say out of my memory. Let me open my copy of the Constitution. Here we go. Okay, I'm now at 75. Okay, and whatever I say about 75, please read 164, which is the equivalent. Okay, I can't waste my time reading both. Okay, so when I read 75, equivalently, you will also look at 164. Okay, the Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President and other ministers shall be appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. So, the Prime Minister advises personally the President with regard to the ministers to be appointed. Then we talked about the Council of Ministers, which is now 15% of the electorate. So that all the ruling party MPs cannot become ministers. 15% cap is now there. 75(2) tells us the ministers shall hold office during the pleasure of the President. So you will see this word pleasure occurring in 3 places in our Constitution here. The governor also holds office during pleasure, and government employees also hold their office during the pleasure of the President. And in the second semester, we are looking at the doctrine of pleasure. And this pleasure is not the personal pleasure of the President, but it is actually the pleasure of the Prime Minister. Because the Prime Minister advises the President who will be sworn in as a minister. So when a particular minister loses the confidence of the Prime Minister, not the confidence of the Lok Sabha, loses the confidence of the Prime Minister will say that I no longer want you in the cabinet, and accordingly the President will exercise his pleasure and the person will no longer be a member of that Council of Ministers. So the pleasure of the President is actually the pleasure personally of the Prime Minister. Please note the distinction now between the 75(1) advice and the 74 advice. Article 74, there shall be a Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister to aid and advise the President in his functions. All the other functions, it will be the Council of Ministers or the Cabinet decision. But in 75, the advice of whom to appoint or swear in as a minister and whom to now take away from the cabinet because of loss of the doctrine of pleasure is not of the Council of Ministers, is entirely that of the Prime Minister. Please bear that in mind. So 75(2), the minister shall hold office during the pleasure of the President. Now that word pleasure is such a feudal word. Okay, I am pleased to appoint. This is how the queens and kings of England would say. I am now pleased to appoint so and so. So, when the list, honors list as it is called in England. So on the Queen's birthday, believe it or not, the Queen is pleased to issue the honors list and is pleased to declare various people as peers of the realm. So once you become a peer of the realm, then you can call yourself the Sir. Or if you are given an additional, a duchy, or you can become a duke or a lord, etc. And these are all I am pleased to appoint because it's your sovereign personal prerogative. Yet that pleasure now is cast in a constitutional scheme. So it's no longer that personal pleasure of the president, because even as Kehar Singh tells us, the pardoning power is no longer that old monarchical sovereign power of the sovereign. It is still within a constitutional scheme. It's subject to judicial review. So even this pleasure power is not like Meri Marzi. It's not like that. It is also subject to judicial review. So, particularly not so much for ministers. There has not been a case until now like that. But the pleasure of government employees must be exercised within the four corners of Article 311. That you will remove a government employee only after a proper inquiry, 311 second proviso. That is a constitutional constraint. So that word pleasure, which at first glimpse appears to be an old monarchical power, is actually constrained by the constitutional limitations. Okay? So the word is, it's a strange word. I get that. But we look at it as bound by a constitutional rule of law scheme. It's not the arbitrary will. It's bound within a constitutional scheme. Now look at 753. The Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to, not to Parliament, but to the Lok Sabha. Collective responsibility. And it is here that Justice Chandrachud in NCT judgment said it envisages three things. Confidence principle. That is, it will be collectively responsible. Yes, Ramesh, we did talk about 72. My entire Kehar Singh and Ekuru is judicial review by the court of that pardoning power. Malafide, extraneous power, etc. that we just finished discussing in the last class and little bit here. This is judicial review. Yes. Limited grounds of judicial review, which is why it's a constitutional power. Okay, I was just...
Ma'am, in 75(1), the ministers are appointed by the president on advice of the prime minister. Is that advice is binding on the president?
Yes. Yes. However, I'm going to come to one case, B.R. Kapoor, where it is not binding. Okay, so since you asked this question, let me give the answer to you. You will relate it back to what I say in S.P. Anand. If the president, if the prime minister advises the president to appoint somebody as a minister who is not a member of the Lok Sabha and who is also not qualified to be a member of the Lok Sabha. For example, he may be below the age of 21, or he may not be an Indian citizen. Okay, then you are not bound by that advice. There are those circumstances that S.P. Anand and B.R. Kapoor read together tell you that you are not bound to appoint such a minister who is not qualified to be a member of the legislature, because every minister has to be a member of the legislature. And under Article 75, Clause 5, which I have not yet reached, you're given a 6-month window before which you can get elected. Now, if you already know that this person can never get elected because this minister is not an Indian citizen at all, and in the next 6 months he is not likely to become a minister, or the person is disqualified under Article 101, which I'm going to do in today's class. But just to answer the question, since you asked this question, then in which case there is B.R. Kapoor, the Supreme Court says you need not be bound by the advice in such circumstances, because you already know this person can never get elected as a member of the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, or similarly to the state legislature. Okay? But except there, where there is a prima facie disqualification in your face, you will be bound. Okay? If you have any further questions towards the end of the class, we'll again discuss. Okay? Is that okay, Vishal?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, so look at 3. Collectively responsible to the House of the People. And what does that entail? Dr. Justice Chandrachud tells us that you must have the confidence of the House. Who will have the confidence? The Council of Ministers will have a confidence. Now, suppose one minister is corrupt and the president, a prime minister advises the president that he is now no longer part of my cabinet. Okay? And he is removed. You lose the confidence of the prime minister, but the Council of Ministers continues to have the confidence of the Lok Sabha. So merely because one minister is removed, it doesn't mean that the cabinet lost the confidence of the House. The second principle that he tells us is confidentiality principle. What is that confidentiality principle? That you can have any amount of debate within yourselves as the cabinet. Cabinet is not a constitutional word, but we use it because it comes to us from British Constitutional Convention. Maybe I should just use Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers, because the word Council of Ministers does not distinguish between state minister, deputy minister, cabinet. Everybody is part of it. But the word cabinet indicates only somebody who is a member sworn in as a cabinet minister. So we have cabinet secretariat and things like that. Okay. So you will have any amount of debate, but you will speak in one voice when you come to either the public or when you come to the Lok Sabha. And free views exchanged in between are not to be made public. And the third principle, therefore, which is a corollary of this, is the unanimity principle. You will work unanimously. And if any one person loses, therefore, the confidence of the cabinet, of the Prime Minister, then, of course, it will fall. But when we say that the House has lost its confidence in the Prime Minister who heads the Council of Ministers, then that entire government will fall. So now here is articles all important. Before minister enters upon his office, president shall administer to him the oaths of office and secrecy. And therefore this secrecy is that all the Official Secrets Act and the oath of secrecy. Now come to 75(5), which is the article over which there has been maximum case law. A minister and look at the word here, a minister, it doesn't use the word a prime minister. So when we come to Devi Gowda's case, who has, I think, Vinayak, you've prepared? Vinayak, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. A minister who for any period of 6 consecutive months is not a member of either House of Parliament shall at the expiration of that period cease to be a minister. So unlike the British constitutional scheme, where a person should have been a member before becoming a minister, we have not chosen to follow that convention, and we have given ourselves a 6-month window where a person can become a minister, will be part of that collective responsibility. He will be allowed to enter the house. He will answer questions. He will be accountable, but he cannot resume a seat in the Treasury bench as a member of the ruling party, but only as a minister. Okay? But within 6 months, he must get elected. And elected where? Look here, to either House of Parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Okay. Now, before we come to SP Anand's case, I'm going to run through certain other provisions which I think are important. Please look at Article 79. You will read it at leisure yourself, please. I'm just highlighting a few important ones. I expect you to just quietly read all of them later after class. Constitution of Parliament. The Parliament shall consist of President and the 2 houses. So, President is a member of the Parliament. He is a part of the legislature in that sense. But he doesn't sit in Parliament except where he either sends messages to Parliament under Article 88 or when he addresses Parliament in a special address in 87. So just look quickly now, 86 and 87. Look at 86. President may address either House of Parliament or both houses joint sitting for the purpose, and for that purpose require the attendance. He can also send messages. So joint sittings. And once a year.
दोस्तों, अगर आपको आज का लेसन पसंद आया हो तो वीडियो को लाइक करें। इसी के साथ अगर आपने अभी तक हमारा चैनल सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है तो सब्सक्राइब के बटन पर क्लिक करिए और बेल आइकन दबाना ना भूलें, ताकि आपको एजुकेशन से रिलेटेड नए नए अपडेट्स मिलते रहें। और अधिक जानकारी पाने के लिए आप हमारे फेसबुक और इंस्टाग्राम पेज से भी जुड़ सकते हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में दिया गया है। धन्यवाद।